You turn the thing on
Yeah, I don't know how.
there. I don't know, it's not until it works.
But he also has files. Yeah. And I don't know if the ZBO would be. Either. Here,
Power right there.
yeah, but there's some way of,
I have to connect it.
yeah, it's Delia has the files. Yeah, not on this one. So hopefully she's gonna come on in. She has the files for the cannabis stuff.
There it is.
All right, well. We'll do what we can do. Okay. But wasn't aware she wasn't gonna be. And I thought the video was coming, but I don't know. Are you recording? So we'll go ahead. So I might as well go ahead and call to order Woodstock's Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for July 6, 2023. Whatever time you have. Amy is fine with me. And we'll go through a roll call. Dwight, do you mind starting us off?
Wait, Branowitz?
Joseph Avalon,
Porter.
Dean Gould,
Sid Blodgett,
Jeff Gordon,
Jeffrey Markoff.
Joe Palulik.
and I don't see any commissioners online. So I believe we do have a quorum, which is good. And then for alternates, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, we need all of you alternates. Unless any of you object and don't want to be an alternate. So if we can just note that all 3 alternates are seated. I don't know the last time that happened. Do we want to go backtrack through the minutes when you have some free time and find that out?
Even motion.
I'll take that as considering it and you'll get back to us at some later point to the. So, well, congratulations for all 3. Pledge of allegiance. And I allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, with liberty. Thank you. Have 3 things on the agenda tonight that we figured out what we got. One is we had wanted an update from the zoning enforcement officer about enforcement. And there was some things sent out by email, which I hope everybody got. John Krzyzewski sent some things out. But I don't see them. Is there? No waiting. Is there?
When did he send that stuff?
It was very recent.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I asked for stuff to be sent. And what got sent out. So John said he had some stuff to get to us. But I also had asked for the copy of the permits to be sent. So people could see copies of it. But I don't see John or any of his colleagues are here to discuss this about ZBO enforcement. And we also had a home occupation permit that we received that we have wanted to review with the ZBO. So I said, sure, let's put that on for this, which is one of the other agenda items. Agenda item 4, and then there's agenda item 6. But we had wanted to follow up relative to the zoning permit item. We don't have the ZEO to discuss it. We do have the ZEO's letter previously sent to us that he felt that he feels it the one relative to Bucks meets the zoning regulations. He is otherwise prepared. My understanding is to sign off on it. We had asked him to wait so we could discuss it at this meeting, since the commission has prior involvement. We just wanted to make certain we closed off loops. Proceed accordingly, but I'll open it up to commissioners. I don't know if there's anything further that John Krzyzewski is going to tell us beyond his letter, but I'm not speaking for it. Joe,
Yeah, it was just, would have liked to talk with the CEO during the evaluation of the zoning permit. This is kind of at the end of the road that it was determined that just a zoning permit would be appropriate, but was at least pleased to see some of the documentation that was filed. What I see for permit folks, the narrative about what their business intentions are, the fact that it's been identified as a bar. The NDDH approval documentation that was emailed. I did want to mention to John about, I think there was a comment about previous interpretations of zoning. Businesses on farm stands that would make him think that this would be appropriate and separate from Bucks or any other application. I just wanted to discuss with John the fact that I don't think we want to perpetuate a different interpretation of the regulations that may have occurred in the past. And therefore, there's something that was permitted, but it was under a different interpretation of the zoning regulations. So just because something was permitted in the past, I don't want to use that as the judgment to say that anything similar to that would be acceptable, particularly if it is not compliant with the regulations. But he's not here to say all of that too. Won't say anymore.
Okay, anything from anybody else? Sid?
Yeah, got a couple things to say, but before I do, I think what Joe's also saying, if I'm understanding it correctly, is just because we made mistakes in the past, doesn't mean we have to keep repeating them. Whether it's a permit that's issued or a subdivision filing or like anything. I think some people rely a lot on precedent and it has value, but again, mistakes, mistake, we acknowledge it, we adjust it and move forward instead of keep falling back on something that regretted. So that said, I'd like to talk a little bit about the CEO's statements that were provided at the last meeting about Bucks and the connection to farming that he claimed. I would like to start by saying, Bucks is open for business. I drove by there the other night. They're continuing to operate. So our review at this point during the meeting tonight really isn't hampering their operation. They're continuing on as if they had some kind of permit to operate. What I tended to focus on was the definition of agriculture that's both in our zoning ordinance and in the Connecticut General Statutes, and they are very similar. Both of them, though, use a phrase at least 3 times that something must be incident to ordinary farming operations. That something has to be incidental, and that means what? We don't have that phrase defined in our zoning ordinance, but we do talk about other sources of information, dictionaries and whatnot. One of them is that latest illustrated book of development done. It defines incidental as essentially something that's subordinate to and minor in significance and bearing a reasonable relationship to the primary use. So this is saying that there's a primary use of a piece of property and a incidental subordinate or secondary. And that secondary use is much smaller than the primary use. And that makes sense. So what we've been presented so far, and this is certainly open for discussion how others might see this, but I don't think the CEO or anybody else really made a connection between an ice cream stand and what kind of farm they have. They certainly didn't say that the ice cream stand is dependent on farming operation. So here's another example. Let's say there's an orchard in town. And that's their primary purpose. That's the primary use is an orchard. And let's say they have a cow or a bull, which leather comes from, right? So does that give them the right to open up a shoe store? Because some of the shoes they sell are leather. And I would say, no, there isn't that connection, and that shoe store could be over time infinitely bigger than the farm. And again, that kind of goes in face of this incidental use. So looking back at Bucks and their home occupation permit that was issued, and the public hearing that happened a year or two into it, so that's probably 3.5, 4 years ago. There were a lot of concerns brought up about noise, traffic, safety, lighting, congestion. And I don't think those were really addressed or changed or limited or altered. And I think that's why the neighbors had such strong feelings about it. Another point I'd like to bring up is, again, going back to this definition of agriculture. Both our zoning ordinance and state law, which is Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 1, Section 1.1, Section Q. Very end of which says, and I quote, "Nothing herein," talking about the definition of agriculture and farming, "shall restrict power of a local zoning authority," under Chapter 124. So I believe we have the right and the ability to talk, discuss, and make decisions about things that are related to agriculture or farming, if they don't meet this test of being incidental to.
Anything further to say?
No.
Oh, okay. Anything
Thanks.
from anybody else? I know our definitions of agriculture are exactly what the state definition is.
However, if I could interrupt, that last statement I just quoted is excluded from our definition.
It is because that's a statute that wanted to make clear that state is overriding zoning in certain regards. And our definition otherwise is just the definition of the statutory, authority statement, so to speak, or limitation of authority, but we otherwise tag to whatever the definition gets amended over time by the state in 1-1Q. That's what we define it as. Consistent. I guess the issue is, if this meets, in my mind, if this were to meet what our regulations say, then it would be approved, which is separate from whatever action the CEO took. Otherwise, not discussing things with us until there was a discussion that had to be brought to the table for us, just to make certain we can close the loop. So I guess the issue from our point of view is we delegated authority to the CEO to sign off these permits. Unless there's anything specific that people are finding to say that this can't be issued, it's that my understanding is the CEO has already made the determination. The regs, according to his statement that he's given us, this was dated June 14th. The CEO report, and also what he told us at a prior meeting in June. So I guess the issue is if it does meet the regulation, it would therefore be approved. My understanding is he's prepared to. But he told us he's prepared to sign it. He just held off waiting for our meeting, of which he's not here. But I'll open up to what others. Joe Blue.
I wasn't here when the initial permit issued. What type of permit did they get initially?
It was a home occupation,
Home occupation.
which expired this year. They have now sought a different permit. It's not a home occupation that was submitted to the
So
CEO.
what type is being submitted right now?
And there was a copy sent out, all the paperwork by email. It's application for a zoning permit.
So it's not a home occupancy permit anymore.
No, it is not. And so they've submitted, they're not pursuing the home occupation. They're pursuing a different permit. There's a description about what they're doing in their application. And they're saying that they are, what they're doing is part of their farm. They also talk about that, they say here, no product sold here that did not come from our farm. They do talk about the ice cream, which had been the issue before about the occupation. They say 100% of our ice cream is made on site, everything else is 100% a farm product produced on our farm. And that's how, based upon my understanding in this memorandum from the CEO, what the CEO talked with us about at the last meeting. He's tagging it as agriculture. Or incidental to agriculture, or part of agriculture. In his interpretation of the regs, he does state that he felt there was his interpretation actually states is a bit different from what was talked about previously, but again, citing his reasoning why in his memo. Feels again, feels it's agriculture.
So just as a follow-up of that, then, is there anything in there about the parking? They stated in there how many parking spots they need.
I have to read through it again. I don't know what was discussed with the CEO. CEO is here. I do not know.
Because I think that was one of the issues in the neighborhood was the fact that there were parking on Kenyonville Road.
I think that was brought up during the hearing that we had. And it was mentioned how they have, like a unpaved area where people can park as well. I don't recall any parking on Kenyonville Road. I do know that speeding was mentioned in litter.
Just volume.
Yes, traffic volumes, yes.
And plus for a home occupation, the parking exceeded. However, there was an issue that was raised during that public hearing in 2019, I think. That there was advice by staff given about parking that wasn't conforming, I guess, to what the regulation said, because they were, Bucks was acting in good faith based upon the advice they got. That was brought up during the public hearing that legally one otherwise would hold them liable. They would just have to make certain that they're not otherwise violating provisions of the home occupation and know that their home occupation would expire, which it did. And this is for a zoning permit, not a home occupation.
Okay, so how long is this permit then? If it's approved?
I don't believe there's an expiration. Home permits, occupation permits are
Or 5 years, I think.
this zoning permit says not be 5 years, it will go on.
Unless there's a violation.
Unless there's a violation or they decide that they want to do something different that would require modification. Something with such a scope that it requires a special permit. If they were to continue to be successful and wanted to expand in some way, you know, where they are. So, but it doesn't have an expiration. And the provisions of a home occupation then wouldn't necessarily apply to the zoning permit. It's different. So those limitations, other than, you know, the general type of zoning regulations like. other
Right.
things.
Right.
So, but again, according to the CEO, it does, he feels it meets the regulations. And his interpretation of agriculture and the intent of the regulations regarding agriculture. We do have some other farm stores that, in a sense, that are selling ice cream, some of them not from their own premises, but from other farms in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So, but this is stated that it's ice cream that's coming 100% from their farm, not from some other.
Right. I'm just gonna ask a theoretical question. If there becomes a parking problem on Kenyonville Road, if it becomes a traffic hazard, would that be grounds enough to rescind a permit?
I don't know. The zoning enforcement officer would have jurisdiction over that. But the town does. That would have to fall under the first selectman. And his traffic authority responsibilities, I also don't know.
I know there's
Someone
been-
town must.
There have been complaints. And I don't know if it ever becomes a problem, I guess we'll have to address it at that time. I suppose we could have our public works put up no parking along Kenyonville Road. No parking signs,
I
that's
don't
a
know. if we have
possibility.
authority. That would be the board of selectmen.
Yeah, the first
Have
selectment
authority.
is the traffic authority.
We
That
don't
would
have
be
that
the
authority.
traffic authority,
Okay.
but that might solve that problem, that's all I'm saying.
I'm not aware when I had asked the land use department, it was a couple of weeks ago, if there were any further complaints about the Bucks having opened, and I was told, I don't know since then, but I was told there had been no complaints received by the land use department.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I just had a comment that I think Sid's reading of agriculture and focus on the definitions here, I think is very important for us because obviously we're an agricultural community and there's an expanding view of farm stores, farm markets, and farm stands. I'm not sure why that last sentence is Sid referenced in the statute about zoning authority still having some level of control over agriculture, but also just a generalization of the word agriculture. Seems like it is have a raised bed of vegetables, you're a farm, and then that's agriculture. Doesn't necessarily make you a farm, but it can allow a definition of agriculture. And seems to be a way to interpret doing things. And I think it's worth discussing more about this application. Just because it is, I think, an important issue for our community to have a clearer understanding of how we can understand the word agriculture when it comes down.
And our plan had been, we had been discussing agriculture.
Yes.
And then we had to get into the affordable housing plan and we're trying to deal with the cannabis. But according to our strategic plan of our operations, once we finish commercial cannabis regulations, that we wanted to get back to agriculture.
Yeah.
One thing I will note in here is that we are recognized by the state of Connecticut as a farm, and that's something that's been brought up for other operations. That what someone may say is their farm is a difference between your confidence that are you actually recognized by the state. Gets into a whole host of other issues of myself that we don't have jurisdiction, but they are recognized by the state as a farm. They have.
Could you raise that question with the town attorney at some point, either you or Delia? How, what are the implications of excessive traffic and who has jurisdiction over complaints of excessive traffic on narrow roads?
We can ask Rick. I thought that came up in 2019.
Yeah.
And I thought it was, that's the purview of the selectmen or the first selectman, not planning and zoning, but we can ask Rich.
Yeah.
That question. And he could let us know.
Haven't been in complaint since, right? I think the following year, which was
No, the complaints, my understanding was, I had asked the land use department a few weeks ago, so we could prep for this meeting. So we would know, so we can get the file, that they really have nothing. Complaints that the town has registered or looked into since all of that initially happened.
As I remember, Jay and Tina attended a meeting. Didn't they go together up there and speak with them? I don't think there's been a traffic issue that I can recall. Memory serves me correctly too. Being opposition.
Please name what it seems to be.
Does anyone have anything else on this? Otherwise, I know we wanted to have a follow-up discussion with the CEO. Otherwise, if we have nothing further, it looks to me that it meets the regulations and the CEO is saying it does, unless there's anything otherwise. Contrary to that, we need to push the point with the CEO. Otherwise, it would seem then if it meets the regulations, get approved. And then if there's anything that comes up later that the CEO's office would handle, as far as anything further that needs to be done. Anything from anybody else? Otherwise, on Monday, I'll let the CEO know. We discussed it. So, okay. I will note that the only other enforcement item is already taken care of. Which I'll just say real quick, my chair's report. 2 weeks, we have the public hearing on street sheds. So far, that's the only item we have. We may have enough. That will have to be scheduling a public hearing on top, do the public hearing, but also my usual thank yous if you don't mind. So. I'll just quickly pivot without objection to the review of home occupation permits. We had wanted to have home occupation permits brought to us, not for us to vote upon, but to have a discussion with the CEO. This was something we had discussions with Dan Malo, the CEO. We enacted a policy on it. I did let and then later remind our current CEOs that that's still in effect. They're aware of it. And that each meeting we hold, if there's a home occupation that comes up, we would discuss it with them, hear what they have to say, understand, about it, because we still have on our to-do list to update the home occupation regulations. But we did receive one that's here. I did ask for, everyone should have received it. I did ask for the file to be sent, or the home occupation one to be sent. And there's a memo that John Guskowski sent us June 28th about it. This is the castle. Christopher Mark wants to do a bed and breakfast as a home occupation. It hasn't yet been inspected.
It has not yet been.
Although the file we got copies of, doesn't list that the CEO has done an inspection. It's required to get changed that on the application forms, not to make it optional, but to say it has to. And those are the current forms being used.
Yeah. But I thought in some of the correspondence online, the fire marshal was going through steps to review it. I don't recall seeing a final conclusion about it being meeting fire safety standards. I know people were going to be looking at it. Unless I lost a string somewhere.
The only one I have is from September of 2022. I don't know if there's been anything updated since. What's gone into, there was an inspection, September 15th. It looks like 2022, Castle B&B update inspection. I don't think they were running a B&B then, but they had no permit. I don't know what they were doing. That's the only one that we got a copy of, was September 2022. I don't know what's followed since. I asked for whatever there was to be copied and sent to everybody. We do have NDDH, which is January of this year. And then we have the application, which came in June. So, open if people want to have discussions about this. Again, the whole point was to be able to have a discussion with the CEO. That's our understanding, but
But does our contract CEO, who attended these meetings, or is that kind of up to him to decide, or is there a cap on the number of hours in a given week?
I thought it included, this might have been my understanding, attending meetings. When they're available or not away, is my understanding. But I don't know, I didn't hear, not being able to attend, tonight. I also like to ask, you know, but otherwise, my assumption has been, and my understanding has been about attending.
Was that decided by the selectmen? Yeah.
Well, ultimately, they're the ones that signed the contract. I know there's an hour limitation. I think it's what, 2 half days? Otherwise available, I think, by email or phone during town hall hours. But physically being here, I think is limited. I thought it was also attending meetings, but I haven't seen the contract, so I didn't have any input into the contract, not PZC, so there might be a provision that says X number of hours. If not, we had faced that when Tina was helping us previously, after the land use department went through a shuffle. And we were told she couldn't attend meetings. But then, at the time, it was a different first selectman, and there were some meetings that was agreed to that, yeah, she can attend meetings, and help with that. So that's separate from Delia.
Still hoping now.
I don't know. I'm not certain if so or not, I don't. So. You know, I haven't directly spoken recently with John Guzkowski. I did have a discussion with Tracy, because there's been some confusion about who's supposed to do what for responsibilities, it seems. But that got all straightened out when I talked to Tracy about work and things like that and the processes we have. And making certain that given her hours, she's able to get certain things done. So, Joe?
Yeah, just looking at those reports and, like you say, the last correspondence was September of 2022. As apparently there was an inspection and there were a number of items that needed to be addressed. But that was the last part of the correspondence. There's no record of those issues being addressed, which they may well have been, but there's not. At least this correspondence to say 10, 12 items have been addressed satisfactorily. So I don't know if this home occupation is considered complete, if it's just waiting for the CEO's sign off on it, but it doesn't seem like the investigate information provided by the inspection has been provided.
And that I don't know. John had mentioned, had emailed me and said, hey, we did receive a home occupation. I think Tracy did. And I said, fine, we can put it on for discussion. Because we want to have discussions about home occupations and also how do we view home occupations as we're thinking about updates to the regulations. And, you know, I'm trying to understand what type of home occupation permits are we getting, you know, this fits with what traditionally have been approved as home occupations. How do we view these versus what might need to be updated with the regulations? I know the details of it. You know, certainly John will have to follow our regs to do the inspection, sign off on it. The building official and the fire marshal have to do their own separate stuff, which looks like they have to do, or they are doing. PH did it stuff. I don't know if anyone has anything in general about this type of home occupation. You know, bed and breakfast, anything that. Otherwise.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Oh, you are with us, John.
I just joined a couple of moments ago. I was on a different commission meeting. I jumped over.
Yeah, so just 1 second, because I just want to finish, and I'll recognize you. Because we'd already tackled one item before you were able to come on. So I just want to make certain, does anyone have anything to raise in general about this type of home occupation? then
This
I'm happy.
particular one?
No, just in
Oh.
general, that's one of the reasons we enacted the policy. For us to review and have discussions with the CEO before these things get signed off on, was to see what do we think in general about these types of home occupation permits or things being asked for home occupations. Well, coming in as a home occupation.
Well, I guess we don't have an application form for P and B. I think that can mention.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, has used a home occupation application as.
And Tina was as well.
Which might be something else. Look at it, B and B type application or Airbnb type application. But that being said, I think.
And we have that on our list that we're doing.
Yeah, using home occupation document. It seems appropriate for B and B as long as all the other regulations for NDDH, fire safety. Follow.
John, did you have anything you wanted to say about it? No, we got your memo.
This is, I assume, about the castle. The bed
Yes.
and breakfast, yeah. I don't recall if I said in my memo, the application itself is very light on details. And there's really no indication via narrative on how they, how they intend to comply, which it requires, it's a limited number of rooms. The owner is required to remain in occupancy. There's really none of that information, so I want to flesh that out. But yeah, we use this as a home occupation application because, again, I think as Joe just said, we don't have sort of a separate B&B form or procedure. So my guidance from Delia is that's how she handled it historically. But so the simple form is sort of insufficient as far as I'm concerned. We'll need a little bit more narrative.
And you haven't yet inspected this in person. You're waiting for more stuff to come in.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't inspected. And well, in truth, I'm not sure what from a zoning standpoint we would do to inspect beyond what health or building would. But no, I have not.
The form does require it. We actually made that change before you joined us, or to help us in the land use department. We had actually changed the application form to say all of these have to have an inspection, and that's what section on the bottom that gets signed off that way. Used to be optional by the ZEO, but we changed that when Dan Mailer was ZEO.
Okay.
So the current, the correct application form is being used, but it does require it.
Yeah, so that hasn't been done yet.
Did you ask him about what the fire marshal requested from? That was from September of 2022 with a list of items to be addressed.
It was raised during our discussion that there was, I guess, back in September 2022, the fire marshal had done some inspection and I guess had raised a number of items. I'm assuming the fire marshal will have to follow up on that type of stuff through his office.
Relative to the bed and breakfast proposal itself, or just the facility?
No, the bed and breakfast. It was an inspection that's labeled Castle B&B Update Inspection Report, September 21st, 2022. So I'm assuming the various bulleted items that were raised by Dick Barron, he'd be following up on to make certain there's compliance.
Right, I can talk to Dick about that.
Thank you. So it sounds like from your point of view, you're just trying to get more information or understand what's really being done.
Right, particularly given the history of the use of the property. Absolutely.
And one of the things we have on our active list is to be trying to update, I guess, Airbnb or whatever. We do have the bed and breakfast definition, but in your view, John, it sounds like that we should endeavor to try to make certain we update bed and breakfast or provide more guidance in the zoning regulations, or do you think
Well,
they're open enough for this type of, not for the castle, but in general, if someone comes and says, hey, I want, you know, a home occupation for a B and B, do you feel our current regulations are good enough, or do you feel there's areas that are just needing to be?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have a sense that they're inadequate. They're relatively light in terms of their requirements or their information, demands. But at the same time, I do not get a sense from, being in the area, from serving this commission previously, or things that I've heard, that bed and breakfasts are really in any way a major concern, from a public health, safety, welfare, neighborhood tranquility type perspective. I don't think that this is a major source of agita for the enforcement community. So I don't think there's anything necessarily inappropriate with leaving things as they are. It's just, noting that there's not a lot of information required.
And I just
Yes.
wanted to clarify, from John's perspective, does he see an Airbnb operation different than a B and B operation?
Were you able to hear that, John?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, they are very different. There's certainly a type of Airbnb could be a true, owner lives there, is the host, stays there, serves people meals, with multiple rooms in the same house. Airbnb as a brand encompasses a whole variety of short-term rental situations where the owner may be there, the owner may not be there. And it's a true bed and breakfast is a building code, fire code distinction from a short-term rental. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily consider a short-term rental subject to the bed and breakfast thing. That's an entirely different discussion.
Anything from anybody else about discussion of this home occupation permit?
So he'll be kept up to date on the progress of this.
Right, we're not gonna, right, we need to get more information and per the requirements, so go and take a look.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Anything else on this one? Okay. That's the only home occupation permit that we've got right now, so. Citizens' comments, not on the agenda. It's not, we don't have any members of the public with us, other than one person online. Commercial cannabis regulations, unless I missed something that Delia's away, she has the files. I actually don't have, I know it's not on this, the copies of anything. The plan was for her to discuss with us. Maybe I missed, she had said she's away. I don't know. John, do you know if Delia away? Do you happen to know she might be away this week?
Yeah, I believe she is away this week. She's on vacation.
If memory serves me correctly, I think she did say last week.
Okay, I didn't remember that. Oh, so, because I know she had the files, because she had asked me if there was any updated stuff she needed to provide us. And said, no, unless there's additional stuff we decided we wanted. She had sent stuff out already to us. So I don't have any of that stuff electronically to show. I don't know if we want to do anything with it tonight about commercial cannabis. How do we want to proceed? We do have, there's, I don't know if people have their paper files. There's some stuff that had been sent out. If we wanted to get into stuff tonight, we could. Also, the only thing we have in 2 weeks is the Supreme Sheds public hearing. We have potentially a special permit application that will be requiring us to schedule. There may be other things. We also have a placeholder to either bring up cannabis regulations or the Airbnb regulations. Trying to deal with both, so I kind of just have them as placeholders on every agenda moving forward, so we don't forget that, but we want to keep them on the agenda. So we do have that on the agenda next week, depending upon how long we do the public hearing. With Supreme Sheds, but we can tackle that. So what do people wish to do tonight about the cannabis? Do we want to get into it tonight?
We could recess to one of our neighboring towns and check out. Get some samples.
You can go to Southbridge, there's one right near a few doors down from the driving school. So. But. Yes, actually, it's the state is actually aware of what's happening across the border. The state is getting a lot of revenue from cannabis. And which is very interesting to see. It's actually spending a lot of the revenue pretty quickly. Looking at the budget that just got passed. But it is aware, they actually do have reports. They're keeping an eye on what's going on, especially in Massachusetts. And then you go, you go to Webster, Dudley, Southbridge. There's lots of places popping up.
I was on Route 20. I don't know, day last week. I hadn't been on that stretch between like 249 and 169. I had never been by tree houses. I was amazed. I thought houses on the street, tree houses, a gigantic place. I forget what the name. It's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Pretty fancy too.
Yeah, there's a lot. The state is actually looking to see what it can do to expand things further. There was discussions this legislative session about what to do to allow cannabis sales to then allow, could the state potentially allow it to be used there and can also allow cigarettes, cigar, hookah smoking, and then also serve alcohol. That didn't go very far, but there was actually a lot of wording about trying to expand that, and a lot of business owners interested in that. It's a expanding market, I guess. The state does have reports on estimated tax revenue if that were to happen. So, which is interesting to read the reports. But with that said, do we want to get into cannabis tonight, or do we want to wait till Delia's back? Do it in 2 weeks? However we wish to do it, it's fine.
I think we should table it until Delia's here, so we can review it. Make
Okay,
any modifications while she's here.
okay. Fine with everybody then? Okay. We'll have that on the list. If there's anything additional that Delia wants to provide us, she can, she'll certainly send it out. She had told me that she didn't have anything beyond what she already sent.
I think she was going to take the draft that we've been working on that has both the red text and the crossed out text and put together more of a clean copy that shows the changes to date.
I can
that we
ask her,
discussed.
about that unless
Because I was looking for that, I didn't see
I'll see what her last
copy.
version is. I didn't bring my electronic file, so there may be something she sent. I don't know what she sent. What's the last
Gonna
one?
work on the highways.
Yes,
Is that what you
Yes.
call it, Doug? Is that what we call it? Yeah, some. I mean,
and on June 14, she did send out some updated information and
Yes.
some maps.
And there was also, I wasn't able to attend a few meetings. There was also some printouts that I guess the commission had some questions asking Rich about. This was back in May. I don't know if that my commission got answers to that. I think I had missed the June meeting, so I don't know if that came up at that meeting. Does anyone remember questions? I have a copy of something she sent to Rich in May. Looks like there were like 6 or 7 questions to ask him about cannabis. Some of them were about definitions. Some of them were about creating a new zone in South Woodstock and certain legalities about how to do it. Does anyone remember if there was anything at a meeting I missed and there were replies back?
I don't think there was a reply.
All right, I'll follow up with her then. about
we
that.
haven't talked about it since that.
I don't know. There was a June meeting I missed. I think the first week in June. The Senate was still in session. So that wasn't, if those answers didn't come back.
I think we talked about hosted and non-hosted and.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a bunch of Airbnb stuff. Yeah.
So I'll ask her about if there's any reply that's come back to break that. And if we get that, then I can see if we can get that time packets for next week. Usually Rich is pretty good replying, so well, it looks like this actually. Yeah, this was May 12th. May 15th. Okay, so I'll follow up on that if the commission didn't hear in June about it. Sounds like there will be something we will get. Okay, was there anything else we're waiting on other than to make certain we know what is the latest copy? I'll double check the electronic version. Okay. Well, that will be our June 20th. Put that on the agenda. That's a definite then. That then takes us to the last item.
I raise a question.
Yeah, question, is John still on?
Yes. Please so, yeah.
As I drove in, I came past Rusty Relic and they had their sign out saying live music. Pretty sure in our last approval of their permit for that, we asked them directly about live music and they said we're not going to have any live music at that site. They didn't need to add that to their permit. And now season is opened up where it's warmer and they're posting a sign saying they're having live music on Saturday. To me, it's a blatant disregard of their approvals. Just what do we do to get that taken care of?
Okay, I can reach out to them.
Okay,
And Jeff,
yes,
just want to add, I know you've been busy and the office is still going through a transition point. Just want to clarify that commissioners are still going to be getting printed copies of what is being issued for documents for these meetings.
yes, this one we didn't, because the only document we had was the agenda, and then there was additional things that came out that were sent by email, but I did have a discussion, a lengthy discussion with Tracy about printing of stuff.
Okay.
We're also trying to be of help with regards that our regs do require in certain situations applicants to provide a certain number of copies. And where that hasn't always been the case. So I think that's helpful to make certain that when our regs say there should be copies provided, they're copied. So she's not having to
Right.
do a lot, of that. And our regs do say, hey, in this situation, provide, I think, 50 copies. And, we should just make certain we follow that. But yeah, things are otherwise would be printed up, but I don't think anything was planned to be printed for this meeting, because we had the agenda that was emailed. And
Well,
then-
like the two applications for the home occupation for bucks for the 13 pages as part of that application.
I don't think there was enough time to get it printed, because this stuff, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I think some of the stuff like the files or whatever that we got copies of, those went out after the agenda. I don't think there was enough time for her to get printed copies together for this meeting.
And none to be at the table tonight.
I don't know if she had, was able to do it, because one of the things I talked with her about is, and she's very mindful of this with her hours, that we. Not really last minute, but if there's certain things that we are needing to get, or hey, we need a file, and where it's getting to us, not because it's getting late, it's just. If something is requested to get to us, if there's not enough time to get it in the meeting packet, try to get it out electronically so people are at least aware, hey, there's additional stuff, but sometimes we'll request like prior meeting minutes or something like that on certain things. So I did talk with her about, what she's able to do with, printing stuff, as best as she can. So, right.
Sure. And
Yeah.
not trying to make too big an issue.
And I think
but
that
it's
those
a
are the
lot of
reasons.
printing.
Yeah, no, and she's willing to print the stuff. One of the things she's concerned about is if we get like a big application from somebody. They're supposed to provide us copies and they don't. She's not gonna have the time easily to start printing 10 billion copies, for every single one, but trying to do the best one can. But otherwise, she has been trying to provide the copies, but if there's a request late, relative to the meeting, one's trying to get printed copies here, but it may not always work, given her hours. But
And the last thing, and I'll, to interrupt, but the portions that Delia sends out, like the map she sent on that June 14th memo, I couldn't print the maps. That came with her document, and I don't know if her documents that Delia transmits to the commission, I'm sure she sends it to Tracy in the land use office. Are those intended to be copied and distributed to the commissions as hard copy?
my understanding is usually Delia actually does make copies. There's
Well,
many times she
I'm
brings.
only
copies
raising
with her.
it because if there's not enough time in the office to do these things, that becomes an issue we can bring up to the collector. Say, staff needs more time to complete the tasks that are being asked. Not to say Tracy's not doing a good job, but if there aren't enough paid hours to do the work, then you need to get more paid hours.
I think Tracy's doing a very good job every time I've been talking with her.
Yeah.
And having discussions with her, I think she's doing a very good job. She's very mindful of limitation of hours posed upon her. That's an issue that had been raised to the selectmen several times. That office hours were cut. Even though we were advocating to make certain we were trying to maintain hours. in the office. The land use department does a lot of work in planning and zoning, but there's other aspects as well, with it. So she does try to get the printouts. Delia usually brings printouts with her. So I don't know, I don't know if this is something she had prior given to us at a meeting. And thus, but if she's away, she wouldn't have been able to get printouts, but she usually will bring printouts, Delia does. But I can talk again with her about, her printing, but my understanding is she does. So, but again, a lot of it is the hours available, Tracy, and want to be mindful of the work she's doing, and I think, my recent discussion with her was very good, and she had her questions answered, felt good as far as the discussion we had. But again, it's how many hours she has. So we're trying to make certain we can get stuff printed. That's one of the reasons why whenever an applicant is required to provide copies, she's going to remind them. It's not as if we're going to push everything on. There are certain situations that are required to. But I can follow up, or I think it had to do with some of this stuff, the timing of when it was coming out, and then Friday not open, Monday not open. Because they took the holiday for Monday and for Tuesday, of course. Sid?
I think ideally, I appreciate Delia bringing copies to the meeting, but it's kind of nice to have those a few days in advance. We can look them over instead of walking in and trying to figure out what's in front of us and see the application. Else. Could the submittal of adequate number of copies be a requirement? And if it's not met, the application is incomplete, be pushed out a month without that clock starting to tick?
It depends upon when things are received. For example, if we receive something for a special permit, we have up to, I think, 60 days. We've done it a few times where we didn't schedule the public hearing the next month. We actually waited 2 months because we received massively incomplete application. So the clock does start at certain times. Ultimately, if it's deemed incomplete, even when we're reviewing it, we can deny it for lack of meeting the regulations, or it can be withdrawn, resubmitted. I have talked with Delia because there are things that she's trying to do with her reviews and trying to get the memos out. But certainly we try to see if that's why we have that application submission deadline that kicks in 10 days before, and try to follow it. There are times where something's real small, it's like a 1 or 2 page non-residential zoning permit, non-substantive. I'll say okay to add and make certain we can get everything out initially electronically, so all of you are aware, hey, here it is, and then try to make certain we can get the copies. If we wanted, I don't think our regulations, and I'll have to double check this, require every application to provide copies for it. I think the 15 came from 12 commissioners, one to make certain there was one for, in the land use department. I'm trying to remember how 15 came up with the regulations. But I guess it's up to us how we want to handle, the applicants. Do we want to require applicants to provide copies for everybody? Or is it only in the certain situations that's spelled out in the regulation? Is that what you're asking, Sid?
Yeah, no, I think I get where you're going with just, piles and piles and piles of paper that isn't really necessary. I think we all want to make informed decisions and give it some thought, but yet, chuck this stack of paper every month.
And there are times that the paper is extremely helpful, especially maps. But we also want to make certain that people, and we do require, certainly when they're going to show up maps and plans, it's one thing to have the easel there. People online aren't going to be able to see that. We do require the electronic to be able to show, especially when dealing, zoom in or do whatever. We do require the digital, so which I think applicants have been providing anyway. So everything gets posted up on the town website anyway as public documents. But I have had discussions recently with Tracy about the workflow of printing stuff when we try to be mindful of. I think the earlier we add things to the agenda, and usually that gets squared away. We finalize the agenda the Wednesday of the week before. She's able to turn around, get things into meeting packet for Thursday. And she told me that works to be able to get that done. To sign off, and if there's something to get added on afterwards, we can help. Do look to see if we can get the printed copies. Does everyone want printed copies of all of that stuff, or just go by what's sent electronically? And you guys, print it.
If something gets added afterwards, lost it.
Okay.
And I know sometimes all on the town website as well.
It gets posted anyway, so members of the public can see it. That's why, the big reason it gets posted, and I think that's fine. I don't have no problem with it. There are things that are public documents, other than privileged documents, we do post. And members of the public can certainly, access it if they want readily and easily. So again, I've had discussions with Tracy about the printing, and there was some of it was some questions as far as what was being done before, what was actually being done. When she came on, I guess there wasn't much in the way of any training for her, she told me. So she wanted to make certain what she was doing was what we were requesting, or was she missing anything? I think she's been doing a very good job with the hours she does, half days, 4 days a week, trying not to overwhelm her with having to do way too much, but on the other hand, there's stuff the commission just has to have. And I'll have a follow-up discussion as well, as far as where that stands of us getting the copies. I'll clarify with Delia about the stuff that she does. I think she is the one providing the copies, as I understand it. But she brings them, but I'll verify that with her. I don't think she comes here and makes the copies before the meetings.
When they're all electronic, can't they be sent to the town hall?
That would be then Tracy.
Was there not enough money in the budget to Tracy full time?
My personal opinion is, I think, always could have looked into, but I'm not sure that was what was the master plan. We did, when we submitted the budget request, we did advocate for one to make certain we get more hours. Because hours were cut basically in half. So that position. But I'll verify with Delia, even the one making the copies, she does a review. She submits things to town hall, so it's in the file, because she usually includes me in on the email to say, I've submitted it. It's going into the file, but I can verify if she's the one making the copies, or is it the copies just happening here. I know there are times she comes in with paper copies and she distributes them, so I'll verify that who's doing what when Delia does her reviews. So if people still want to get the paper copies, we'll look to do it.
And mailed.
Well, do you want the mail? Because the mailing is,
I think we've got through this about 4.
I know, and I'm just
All the
asking it again
commissioners,
for.
for the most part, would like to have mail. or at least everybody wanted hard copies. And
There are,
the mail.
if you want the mail, I know there's been delays sometimes with mail delivery when they go out on Thursdays. He does also leave stuff in that green bin.
I don't mind going by it.
And I know she does make the copies of the meeting packets. When I go and pick up mine in the bin, it's a stack.
Not today. It's empty.
Well, yeah, it would be,
Not,
yeah,
not yesterday either, Doug.
right. There was no meeting packet put together for today. But in
All the
general,
old ones are gone too, which is nice.
Yeah.
Finally, it was cleaned out.
but otherwise, normally that's where she puts the packets. But if people want the mail, that's fine, just keep in mind, we've had issues in the past. Mail was slow getting it.
And I'm very careful. I typically pick mine up. And then I go through Joseph's, and I go through Sid's, and I can drop them off at both your houses, because I go right by. you.
Why they're supposed to do that?
Yeah, I know.
Get the mail. Hopefully.
So I mean, so if ones are being mailed and you don't get it in time, it's not Tracy's fault. She's submitting them on Thursdays. She would mail them then. But that's been a concern of hers, and we've encountered that in the past, that some people have said they didn't get their mail in time, or it wasn't received from the post office in time, and that's why there was a push to see about, we got that bin and want to have the packets there that people can just come by. You don't have to worry about it, the mail not getting delivered. But to me, that would be an easier way. It's guaranteed that your packet's there to be picked up, but do people not want to pick it up and get theirs mailed? I just pick it up, I just swing by and pick it up, not fine with it, but what do people wish to do? Because I will, from her point of view, her concern is if she nails it on Thursday, which is what she will people get it enough head lead time for a meeting?
I almost always used to get it on Saturday, sometimes.
Yeah, I get mine on
Saturday,
Saturday.
come on Friday.
I used to get mine on a Monday or a Tuesday.
You live in that building, zip code.
I guess so. I don't know. So,
I like to mail because, to be honest with you, I always forget about the box out front, and I'm not. in town.
So you commute the other way.
Yeah,
I go right by it.
well, why don't we,
Like at least half a dozen great commissioners prefer having it mailed. So I don't know if that answers your question about who wants it mailed, but
what I'll do is I'll send an email out to the commission, include Tracy in on it,
All everybody.
and then people who want it mailed can be mailed. He puts the packet together anyway.
Yeah.
And if you're encountering any issues where you're not getting it with enough lead time for the meeting, then let her know and she'll just mail it, and just put it in the bin. Where she otherwise puts them. But I'll send an email out. Okay.
My point really is Sid's point, in that I really need the information more than the day before. I have a busy week, a lot of you do also. I can't come home on Wednesday night and be able to have time to review everything for the planning commission on Thursday. I need more than one day. So the idea of getting the information out to us on an earlier basis is really important.
And we've been trying for that, and I've been at times trying to enforce that deadline submission. We do have times where we get things from applicants that they just send it to me. We had one meeting recently where there was a change in amount. We find out about it right at the meeting. Which gave, and it was a small little change, but the point was for us to find out right then and there is not fair. But still, where some documents, literally applicants, you suddenly receive or Delia receives the day before.
I've been doing this for a long time on both sides of the table. And I've many a night coming to a planning commission meeting, met with my surveyor out in the parking lot, and he gave me new plans to bring in, and then for us to present to the commission that night. So me nuts, just as much as the commission. I also see it on the other side. I see design professionals issuing a review the day before the meeting.
Yes,
Now, that doesn't help the applicant to be able to respond. So then the applicant responds the next day, which is the meeting day, and then the commission doesn't get to look at it. Any way that we can figure out a system that says information needs to be provided by this day. And everyone has to comply with that, not only the applicant, but also our consultants. Because, you know, you can look at this like professionals a lot of times. You can see that they review it, they know the meeting's coming up on Thursday, well, maybe Tuesday, I don't know.
Well, I have been pushing, I continue to try to push the point behind the scenes and keep track of what reports we're waiting to get in and push and say, we need them in by that deadline policy. And we set that 10 days before to allow us to receive the stuff, get them into packets and get them out. And then people have enough time to review, because as you know, to review like a big subdivision, that can take quite some time to go through, let alone you know, how much paper you have to go through this, all these different reports and everything. So we've been trying to stick to that. One of the problems we face then is we still then receive things after that. And one of the things the commission may have to do, we did this some years ago, that led to that policy. That policy has been in place for a number of years. Was we used to then just say, well, we're starting to get things that we're supposed to get with enough heads up, and we're getting it 1 or 2 days before, and there's no way we can review it. Even there were times Delia was saying she had no time to, that we would just table and say, fine, you're gonna be tabled, you set things into us too late. We can't do our job, let alone staff do its job, we're gonna table. And that led to that deadline policy. So one of the things we would then have to do as a commission is, if we start receiving things after that deadline policy, we do still note it's received, and I want to make certain commissioners can at least see it initially electronically, so you're aware stuff is. But we as a commission should make a decision. If we're receiving things from folks too late, and it's coming in clearly after that deadline, that we've been reminding applicants about. I know for big things that Delia works on, she is reminding. Because she'll tell me that she's reminded them and they still haven't sent something. It will have to be us to say, you didn't put your stuff in, and are we gonna table because we don't have enough time? I mean, if we're waiting for NDDH, we get that 1-page document that says approved. That's the only thing we're waiting on. That's one thing to set for us to say, okay, that's all right. But versus we're starting to get revised plans, revised reports, design professional sends in late. I know Delia does remind them because she copies me on it. She's reminding them to get something in. So, and that's why sometimes Delia is talking with design professional as she's doing her own review, because she knows that we're going to need some input, try to be proactive. So I guess the issue is, how do we want to handle that as a committee? We've set the deadline and we're still getting stuff in afterwards. No. That would have to be us to say, that would fall to us as a commission, how we want to then tell the applicant, you sent it to us too late, we haven't had enough time to review. That would have to be case by case.
Thursday afternoon, when Tracy drops stuff off at the post office or the green box deadline. Anything coming in after that, it's our discretion whether we hear that hearing or review that application that night or postpone it for the month. That's a little tougher when it's our consultant, like professionals, but they might justify, well, the applicant's consultant didn't get it to me until, after Thursday, I got it turned around fast as I could.
Well, we do have that Monday deadline. So that gives enough time for documents to be sorted through and copied, and put into meeting packets. When I get requests, when I'm told, well, it's a Wednesday and we've gotten a few more documents, it can still make the meeting packet to go out. And that I as chair, I could sign off on and say, okay, it came in after deadline, but the meeting packet hasn't yet been finalized. Okay, because it's going to be put. But then when I start hearing about, well, on a Monday of the week of our meeting, I'm told, well, now we're receiving more documents from the applicant. And I'm like, well, the meeting packet's done. It's not going to make the meeting packet. That has to be for us to decide.
Well, I think.
Yeah,
Jeff
and I agree
made a
with
good point. If the meeting packet's prepared and it's in the mail or in the green box, that's the end. If something comes in afterwards, it has to be considered at the next PNC meeting, the next monthly meeting.
And we can determine we can determine that, because again, there might be a situation where we're waiting for NDDH, that's the only thing. NDDH gives it to us like Tuesday of 2 days before, that may not require us holding up the application. Everything else is done, but if we're starting to get revised plans, which sometimes we do. But we've been pushing design professionals to make certain that they're getting their stuff done in a timely manner. As that, but you're right, some of it is they're receiving stuff from an applicant late. Also, some of it is design professionals doing it. Just the applicants. We would, if something comes into us too late, there's been times I've said no to adding things to the agenda. I've been asked like on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I'm not saying it's happening now. Oh, we've received this, can this be put on the agenda? And I'm like, no, because there's no way the commissioners at any time even look at it, let alone staff. If it has to be reviewed. That's not fair. That's why we have the deadline. So we can, if we're getting things in, would be up to us then to decide at the meeting. Has to be tabled or it's already on, these are things already on the agenda. Not, so I'm very careful what I add in at the last minute. Sometimes it's because I forgot to put something on that I should have put on, so I have to issue a revised meeting because I get reminded about an item that should have been on, so I'm adding it. But otherwise, yes, behind the scenes, there are times I say no. But we receive an application, it's nothing really submitted.
As simple as an NDVH letter saying yes or no, I think we can all kind of still have that hearing that night. Is it at all possible, somewhat of a compromise, to either try to rush through that night versus postponing for a month to get some document the night of, take like a 5 or 10 minute recess. So we can all have a little bit of time to review it and then hopefully allow it to proceed, not have the applicant and their surveyor come back next month and waste that time.
We can take a recess if we wish. We can do that. We've done that a few times for other reasons, but we can if we wish. We can also decide, and we've done this a few times, told applicants that we have to table your item or we're opening the public hearing, but now we're going to have to continue it because we have no time to review something that we've received a day or two ahead. And we've done that. Again, that's why we did the deadline policy. Because we were getting a lot of things last minute. Once we receive something like, for the special permit, there's certain things on that timeline. But there's been a few times, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, where we've received things really incomplete. And we've said, you know what? We've received something and the timeline starts, but we don't want to use the time of the public hearing to burn through. We have up to, I think, 60 days or something to schedule the public hearing. And there's been times we said, you're not going to get your public hearing next month. It has to be the month after. So you can get everything to us by this deadline. So, and that's for us to decide. So I would say, I think that 10 days before can work. I think it does work as far as when to really remind people to get things in and what makes the agenda or doesn't make the agenda. But then it's up to us when we get things, despite that, late or something on our agenda. Do we want to recess? Do we want to table? We continue the public hearing, that we can do. And that I think we just should, I don't know, put our foot down or, I guess enforce that more as far as for us to be able, and staff to be able to do its job. One thing in follow up to that, do we want applicants to be, if it's not otherwise stated in the regs, to provide us copies, multiple copies? Are we looking for them otherwise to provide us the copies, or only when it says in the regulations?
Well, I'm not sure that we can ask people to write us copies if it doesn't state in the regs.
We can ask whether or not it's not in the regs, they do it or not.
Why don't we return to our pre-existing policies as far as deadlines? Force what's in the regulation,
Okay,
see how it goes. Still not adequate. Maybe change the regs and get more people submitted.
all right, no, that we can do. I think my understanding is, Tracy, there are applicants who do submit multiple copies, that's always helpful if they do, whether it's not necessarily required in the regs, that's fine. But we are behind the scenes enforcing that deadline. It's just when we get continued documents that filter in after the agenda is finalized on a Wednesday, and the packets on Thursday. So we'll continue to enforce that, and then we as a commission will decide how to handle things that come in later on those agenda items. Okay. Did you have something additional, Joe?
I was trying to answer your question about having applicants to provide copies, and I was going to suggest maybe either Delia or Tracy survey a couple of neighboring towns to see if like home occupation permits or zoning permits are requested in multiple copies for the number of commissioners. I know our subdivision plans are supposed to have multiple copies.
Yes.
For the regulation, but might be interesting to see if the other towns do something like that. The other type of
I believe the subdivision, that's where it says 15, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know for special permits if we require multiple copies for that. I have to look to see if it's in here, but we can ask about that, but I don't know if it is for special permits. Just looking to see if it says under application requirements, if it does or doesn't.
Gonna have some citizens comments while you're looking at it, congratulate. Woodstock Building Associates. For ranking amongst the industry's top customer service leaders for the 10th straight year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah, we don't say for special permits, it just says. Actually, in our regulations, we actually say they're supposed to submit things 10 days before. And I never remember when we updated our zoning regs, we put that in back in 2015. So, okay.
And also, like I said, that Joe had a radio voice.
Yes. Yeah.
Let me just ask you a quick question, Doug. If you have dealings with other towns, projects that you're having to submit things for, are they requiring multiple copies if it has to go to a committee?
There are towns that, in their regulations,
Right.
it tells you have to provide copies. Like sign ordinances are typically one where we skip. You know, we have to, if they have some of these towns have separate commissions that just do on fines. We have to provide the 7 copies for that.
So we would have to decide as a commission if we wanted to do any changes to the regulation.
And that's basically what I would tell you, it's not in the regulation. But that's why we have regulation.
Well, that's something then for the commission to consider how it wants to handle that. In the regulation, we can always see what to do.
I can tell you, there's many towns that I deal with that they submit your application 1 month, they accept it that month, and they don't do anything else. And then they schedule it to review it follow. And at that point, staff has a month to make sure everything's in order. And then when it comes up the next month, everything's there, or else the staff can send your application. And I'll tell you, in those towns, guess what? The applications are complete. Because that's it. Otherwise, you're out another month.
How did the applicant feel about that? Is that too much?
Guess what? We figured it out. That's the
Yeah.
deal. And you just have to. We've all been caught. We're, oh, shoot. I missed it, I go, the applicant's Tuesday, due Tuesday, it's Wednesday. Oh, now I'm 2 months further out. Guess what? Make sure on your Rolodex next month, it tells you. You just
Right now, we don't do that. Other than things that require public hearings, we have to wait at least to our next monthly meeting. We do have the option of waiting 2 months. If we want. Again, we've done that a few times for massively incomplete documents. So
I have no trouble with it. We have a checklist. I think it's on subdivision regulations. Checklist that says this is what needs to be there.
yes,
And I've been doing this for a long time. I remember getting it from one surveyor. He gave me my package and I went through the checklist and I said, he gave me a hard time. Wouldn't even give me a table to work at. And I went through the checklist and said, look at 4 of these items are missing. Oh, we didn't realize. I said, well, you got a checklist, use it.
And the regulations are nice that way. I can print them
There
for
is,
applications and use them as my own checklist during meetings.
the health department has checklists to review a septic. System. I said, you should give that to every septic designer. And say, this is the checklist that we use to review your plans. Give it to them and say, why don't you submit the checklist with us when we get the plans, and then we know that you've gone through it.
Well, we do have documents that we worked on with Delia, that are checklists and that are in the office. And I don't know if they're being given out now. I'll find out, but we actually do have one on subdivision, one on special permit. I thought there was one on non-residential. And I remember going, seeing those checklists. They're literally just what our regs are, and we also create at the time checklists of who's doing what in the office. And using who's supposed to do what, when, who has what responsibility. And if those checklists aren't being used, they're on file. They were all crafted. We can get back to that.
Sometimes you have to go back and say, we have these things, but we're not using them. Let's go back and make sure we're using them.
I'll follow up about if those checklists are, because I know I created a checklist about who was doing what. 'Cause one person was thinking the other one was gonna submit notices, the other one's like, no, you are, and they weren't submitted to the papers, so we created a checklist. This is all the stuff. Who's doing what, has it been done, checked off, but also things to applicants. So if they're not being given out, we can ask that they are, they're on file, how they were created. Do we have an interest in, how do we want to flow it right now? Do we want to just see what's about continuing to enforce? Which is what I'm trying to do behind the scenes for that 10-day deadline. And then continue otherwise as we're doing, and then as a commission, we can put our foot down and say, if you sent us something too late despite that, then we may just table you. But we would have to determine that meeting.
I think you got a yes on that.
Right, but anything beyond that,
Oh, I think that's a good start. If
Okay.
you find that you need something else.
okay, so then we'll look into that then, to make certain, yeah, I have been saying notice on items when they come in too late, but trying to be fair. Something really small, sometimes we're able to get it back in time. And I'll see about where we stand with mailing or packets, so. Okay. Otherwise, anything else before adjournment then? We don't have to be.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So motion by Doug Porter, seconded by Dean Gould to adjourn the meeting. Actually, we have no commissioners on, but it's one where we can just say.
Aye.
You stay, what time you have? Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Why they would do that. They would do that. You can go. Oh, team, run away. Run, team, run. Oh.
Well, did he have a good 4th of July, Joe? Nice and dry?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Caught some good fish in the pond. Take the garden along.
Yeah, I gotta go home and pack a bag.
Hey.